May 28, 2026, 11:47 p.m. Black Sea surface temperature, 19 degrees Celsius. Wind speed, 11 knots from the northwest. Visibility, 4 kilometers under partial overcast. Somewhere in the western Black Sea, 244 meters of steel, carrying refined fuel for Russian-occupied ports, was running dark. Its AIS transponder transmitting a false identity. Its crew unaware that 11 days of Ukrainian satellite tracking had already decided their fate. This wasn't going to be a sinking. Ukraine was going to board her. I'm your host at Steelfront, where we analyze the battles that change wars. What happened in the western Black Sea on the night of May 28, 2026, was not just a tactical victory. It was a doctrinal statement, a signal that the rules of this conflict had shifted in ways Moscow had not anticipated and could not easily counter. Tonight we break down the operation in full, the planning, the hardware, the execution, and what it means for every Shadow Fleet vessel still running fuel to Russian-occupied Ukrainian ports. The vessel had been operating under a Liberian flag of convenience, registered to a shell company incorporated in the UAE 6 months prior. Stated cargo: industrial lubricants bound for a Georgian port. Actual cargo: 68,000 metric tons of refined diesel fuel. Actual destination: the occupied port of Sevastopol, where Russian logistics chains had been strained for over a year by Western sanctions and Ukrainian maritime pressure. Ukrainian GUR, the main intelligence directorate, had been tracking this vessel since May 17th. 11 days of continuous satellite observation, cross-referenced with intercepted communications and commercial shipping data, had built an intelligence package that went far beyond the ship's fake manifest. The tanker's registered name was MV Adriatic Star. GUR analysts had identified it under at least 4 prior aliases since 2024. Its captain, a Turkish national, had made 3 previous runs to Sevastopol under different vessel registrations. The crew of 17 included nationals from Turkey, Georgia, India, and the Philippines, all operating under falsified employment contracts that obscured the vessel's true commercial relationships. Which weapon system proved most decisive in the first phase of this operation? The Magura V5 surface drone, the GUR signals intelligence package, or the fast insertion boats? Comment below. We'll come back to this at the end of the video. The GUR Maritime Operations Cell had been developing a boarding capability for months. Not publicized, not announced. Ukraine's drone naval campaign in the Black Sea had by late 2025 achieved something significant. It had effectively neutralized Russia's surface fleet as a combat force. The Black Sea Fleet flagship Moskva was sunk in 2022. Multiple landing ships, patrol vessels, and support craft followed. By early 2026, Russian naval vessels were hugging the Crimean coastline under dense air defense coverage, rather than projecting force across open water. Russia adapted. Unable to use its own flagged vessels safely, Moscow turned to the Shadow Fleet, a network of aging tankers, bulk carriers, and support ships operating under third-country flags with falsified documentation, moving fuel, ammunition precursors, and dual-use goods through maritime routes that sanctions were meant to interdict. The Shadow Fleet had become a critical artery in the Russian war economy. Ukraine's response was to develop something no modern state had attempted with unmanned maritime systems: use them to support a boarding operation. Stay with me, because what happens next doesn't just disrupt a sanctions-evading network, it captures one, intact, with documentation that Ukrainian intelligence has since described as the most comprehensive single-source map of the Shadow Fleet's Black Sea fuel logistics ever obtained. The Magura V5 is Ukraine's primary naval strike drone. Built domestically, it displaces approximately 990 kilograms, carries a warhead of up to 320 kilograms of RDX-based explosive, and has demonstrated a combat range exceeding 1,000 kilometers. It travels at surface level, presenting an extremely small radar cross-section, and has proven capable of defeating Russian naval electronic warfare systems through encrypted satellite data links and semi-autonomous navigation. For this operation, 2 of the 3 Magura drones in the package were configured not for strike but for suppression and jamming. Their warheads had been replaced with electronic warfare payloads. directional jamming systems developed in cooperation with Ukrainian defense industry partners. The goal: suppress the tanker's communications and prevent the crew from transmitting a distress signal or alerting Russian naval coordination centers in Sevastopol before Ukrainian special operations personnel were aboard. The third Magura was the real innovation, modified with what GUR sources later described as a boarding collar, a reinforced polymer and steel frame fitted to its bow, designed to lock against a vessel's hull and provide a stable attachment point. This drone carried a remote sensor suite, low-light cameras, a short-range acoustic system to monitor crew activity on deck, and a communications relay node. It would approach the tanker's stern, lock on, and function as both a surveillance platform and a communications bridge for the boarding team. The obstacle that nearly ended the operation before it began was weather. A squall moving through the western Black Sea on the evening of May 27th had pushed wave heights to 2.8 meters, above the Magura's operational threshold for stable low-speed navigation. The boarding collar's locking mechanism required sea state below 2 meters significant wave height to function reliably. GUR planners had a 24-hour window before the tanker reached a position where it would enter Turkish-monitored strait approaches, after which the operation became legally and operationally far more complex. The decision was made to wait 12 hours. The squall passed. By 10:30 p.m. on May 28th, wave heights had dropped to 1.6 meters. The launch window opened. I went through the available open-source reporting on this operation, and one detail kept pulling my attention. The timeline between the order to launch and the moment the first Magura was in the water was 14 minutes. 14 minutes from authorization to deployment. That's not an improvised mission. That's a team that had rehearsed this in precise detail, waiting for the right conditions, ready to move the moment the weather cleared. The Magura drones launched from a Ukrainian fast patrol vessel, operating approximately 60 kilometers northwest of the target. Two jamming-configured units moved ahead at cruise speed, approaching the MV Adriatic Star from her port beam to begin suppressing her communications suite. The third, the boarding drone, approached from dead astern, staying in the tanker's radar shadow, moving at a speed matched precisely to the vessel's 11-knot transit velocity. At 11:47 p.m., the jamming units activated. The tanker's satellite communications system, a VSAT terminal mounted on her bridge superstructure, dropped offline within 90 seconds. Her VHF radio experienced severe interference across all monitored channels. Ukrainian signals intelligence confirmed the suppression was effective. No outgoing transmissions from the vessel were detected after 11:49 p.m. The boarding collar drone made contact with the tanker's stern at 11:53 p.m. Lock confirmation transmitted to the GUR Operations Center. 6 minutes had elapsed since jamming activation. Here's what makes this operation genuinely different in modern maritime warfare. The boarding team didn't approach on the drones. They approached in fast insertion boats, two rigid-hulled inflatable craft, each carrying 4 Ukrainian special operations personnel, moving under the electromagnetic shadow of the jamming drones. The drone coverage masked their approach not just electronically but acoustically. The surface noise of the rib engines was partially obscured by the Magura's own acoustic signature alongside the hull. 8 Ukrainian special operations personnel, climbing a 244-meter Russian Shadow Fleet tanker in the middle of the Black Sea at midnight, with 3 naval drones holding the ship electronically blind. If you think this sounds like something out of a thriller novel, the documentation published by GUR afterward confirms every element of it. The climb took 4 minutes. Ukrainian operators used magnetic-assisted climbing frames, compact, rapid deployment systems designed for exactly this scenario, to ascend the tanker's stern plating to the main deck level. By 12:01 a.m., the first 2 operators were on deck. By 12:04 a.m., the full 8-person team was aboard, moving in 2 4-person elements toward the bridge and the engine room simultaneously. Satellite imagery analysis of the vessel's position confirms what GUR sources described. The tanker maintained a steady course and speed throughout the boarding. The crew, confined below decks by the ship's layout at that hour, had not detected the approach. What's most surprising about this operation isn't the drone capability. It's the intelligence preparation that made a bloodless boarding possible. GUR had mapped the crew's routine watch schedule from 11 days of satellite observation and signals intelligence. They knew that at midnight 4 crew members were on watch, with the remainder in crew quarters in the vessel's forward superstructure. The boarding team's approach to the stern, the opposite end of the ship from where most of the crew was sleeping, was not accidental. It was the product of careful intelligence work layered on top of technical collection. The bridge team, 4 Ukrainian operators, reached the bridge deck at 12:07 a.m. The officer of the watch, a 34-year-old Georgian national, was alone at the helm. He offered no resistance. According to GUR's own published account, he raised his hands and said, in English, "We are not military, we are just sailors." The engine room team reached their positions simultaneously, both objectives secured within the same 60-second window. 0 shots fired. Here's the take that will probably get some pushback. The international maritime community needs to stop treating flag of convenience registration and falsified manifests as administrative violations with light consequences. These aren't paperwork irregularities. The MV Adriatic Star was directly extending the operational reach of a military campaign that has destroyed hospitals, apartment blocks, and energy infrastructure across Ukraine. The crew may have believed they were just sailors, but every crew member who accepts employment on a vessel they know is operating under falsified documentation, running fuel to an active war zone, is making a choice that has consequences for people who never had a choice at all. Maritime sanctions enforcement has been ineffective for 3 years. Ukraine just demonstrated what enforcement with teeth looks like. The remaining 13 crew members were located, secured, and confined to the vessel's mess deck by 12:19 a.m. Ukrainian operators had moved through the ship systematically, deck by deck. No weapons were found, no resistance was offered. Ukrainian sources later described the crew's behavior as cooperative throughout. Several crew members, including the Filipino and Indian nationals, actively identified the location of the vessel's document safe and cargo manifests when asked. The document extraction phase was the operational core of what came next. Ukrainian special operations personnel were not primarily there to seize the ship. They were there to copy everything. The vessel's cargo documentation, navigation logs, satellite communication records, and financial transaction records stored on the bridge computer system were accessed by a GUR technical specialist who had come aboard with the boarding team specifically for this purpose. Ukrainian sources report that extraction of encrypted copies of the vessel's entire digital record, 6 months of shadow fleet operations, route data, port contacts, financial intermediaries, and communication records, took 23 minutes. That package was transmitted via encrypted data link to GUR's Intelligence Processing Center before international maritime authorities had been formally notified that a boarding had taken place. Think about what that means. Before any lawyer, any shipping company representative, any Russian intelligence officer could begin managing the information fallout from this interception, Ukraine already had everything: the network map, the contacts, the money flows, the port relationships, the other vessels. By 1:15 a.m. on May 29th, the MV Adriatic Star was dead in the water, her navigation system disabled by the GUR technical team, her engines at idle, her position broadcasting on standard AIS for the first time in 11 days. Ukrainian operators had reactivated the ship's legitimate AIS transponder, revealing the vessel's true position to international maritime traffic systems. Within 22 minutes, a Romanian Coast Guard vessel had been dispatched from Constanța. International maritime authorities were formally notified of the interception at 1:41 a.m. One detail that stayed with me when reviewing the timeline: at the moment Ukrainian operators reactivated the AIS and announced the vessel's position, they simultaneously transmitted the evidence package, the cargo documentation, the route history, the financial records, to Interpol's Maritime Trafficking Coordination Unit, to the U.S. Treasury Office of Foreign Assets Control, and to the EU's sanctions enforcement body. By the time any external party could begin asking questions about the legality of the boarding, the evidentiary foundation for sanctions prosecution had already been distributed to 4 separate international enforcement authorities. This was not improvised. Every step of the legal strategy had been pre-planned alongside the operational one. How many Shadow Fleet vessels changed course within 48 hours of this operation becoming public? We'll come back to that number at the end. And the answer changes how you understand the strategic impact of what happened that night. The crew of 17 was transferred to a Romanian Coast Guard vessel at approximately 3:20 a.m. They were taken to Constanța for questioning by Romanian and international authorities. The MV Adriatic Star was escorted to a Romanian port under maritime law authority for cargo inspection and vessel detention. The 68,000 metric tons of refined diesel fuel aboard, assessed at current market prices at approximately $47 million, was subject to seizure proceedings under EU Sanctions Enforcement Authority. The Russian response was revealing in what it did not say. The official position from Moscow's foreign ministry, delivered some 19 hours after the operation, was that Ukrainian pirates had committed an act of maritime terrorism against a civilian vessel operating lawfully in international waters. There was no acknowledgement that the vessel was carrying Russian-destined fuel, no acknowledgement of the falsified documentation, no attempt to explain why a vessel bound for a Georgian port, as its manifest stated, was operating in a section of the Western Black Sea, inconsistent with that routing. Intercepted communications from Russian naval coordination centers in Sevastopol, reported by Ukrainian sources, told a different story. Within 6 hours of the operation, Russian Naval Command had issued an alert to all Shadow Fleet operators in the Black Sea region, warning of new Ukrainian maritime interception capability. That alert described the drone-supported boarding method in detail, indicating that Russian intelligence had enough information about the operation's execution to understand what had been used and how. The strategic impact became visible within 48 hours. Ukrainian General Staff reported that satellite monitoring of Black Sea shipping traffic showed 3 other Shadow Fleet vessels, previously tracking toward occupied Ukrainian ports, altering course toward Turkish Strait approaches. A 4th vessel, a bulk carrier that Ukrainian intelligence assessed, was carrying dual-use electronic components, reversed course entirely, and returned to a Turkish port. None of these vessels had been intercepted. The change in behavior was driven purely by the deterrent effect of the May 28th operation. This tells us something about the broader contest in the Black Sea. For 2 years, the dominant narrative has been Ukraine using naval drones as a substitute for a conventional navy it doesn't have. That narrative was always incomplete. Ukraine has been building a maritime special operations capability that treats the Black Sea as a contested operational environment, rather than a body of water it simply tries to deny to Russia. The MV Adriatic Star operation made that capability publicly demonstrable in its most sophisticated form. Russia can no longer assume that a third country flagged vessel with falsified documentation is safe from Ukrainian action simply because it isn't flying a Russian flag. What do you think? Did Ukraine cross a line by boarding a vessel flying a third country flag in international waters? Or was this the only enforcement tool that actually works against a shadow fleet designed to circumvent every legal mechanism? Drop your analysis in the comments. We read every one of them. The operational lessons from this mission will be studied for years. 3 stand out immediately. First, electronic dominance at the maritime tactical level doesn't require a conventional navy. The Magura V5 drones, reconfigured for electronic warfare rather than strike, created a localized electromagnetic suppression bubble around the target vessel that lasted long enough for the boarding team to gain control. Ukraine demonstrated that drone warfare in the maritime domain is not limited to strike. It can enable every phase of an operation. Second, the intelligence preparation was the force multiplier. 11 days of tracking, crew schedule analysis, detailed knowledge of the vessel's internal layout and document storage. The boarding team did not go into that operation improvising. They went in with a picture of that ship so detailed that the difference between a bloody confrontation and a bloodless boarding came down to knowing exactly where each crew member would be at midnight. That kind of preparation is what transforms a high-risk operation into a controlled action. Third, Ukraine treated the legal and information domains as operational environments, on par with the physical one. the pre-planned evidence distribution to international enforcement authorities, the immediate AIS reactivation to establish legal legitimacy, the coordinated media strategy, none of these were afterthoughts. They were integrated into the operational plan from the beginning. The answer to our earlier question: in the 48 hours following the public announcement of the MV Adriatic Star boarding, not 3 but 4 Shadow Fleet vessels changed course, away from occupied Ukrainian ports. 3 rerouted through Turkish Strait approaches. 1 returned to port entirely. Combined estimated fuel cargo value of those 4 vessels, approximately $190 million. Ukraine didn't need to board them. It just needed to demonstrate, once, conclusively, that boarding was possible. That's deterrence built on capability rather than threat. Was the boarding of the MV Adriatic Star the right decision under international maritime law? The legal debate will run for years. Was boarding the only instrument available that could actually penetrate a shadow fleet system designed to exploit legal ambiguity? Almost certainly yes. Could Russia have protected its shadow fleet from this type of interception? Not without extending naval escort coverage far beyond the operational range where its surviving Black Sea Fleet units can safely operate. Which is to say, not without accepting the losses that would come from operating in waters where Ukrainian naval drones have already demonstrated their reach. What would you have done differently if you were commanding the GUR Maritime Operations Cell that night? The crew, the jamming, the boarding collar concept, the intelligence package. Where do you see an alternative approach that achieves the same result with less risk? Subscribe to Steelfront, because we break down the battles that textbooks will study for decades. The Western Black Sea is quiet now, where the MV Adriatic Star ran dark on the night of May 28th. The tanker sits in a Romanian port, its cargo under seizure, its documents in the hands of 4 international enforcement authorities. Its crew is answering questions in Constanța, and somewhere in the Shadow Fleet network that moved Russian fuel across that water for months, operators are looking at rerouting plans and wondering which vessel Ukraine has been tracking for 11 days that they don't know about yet. That uncertainty is the point. Real tactics, real consequences. Steelfront.